Today is the 7th and last day of the May 91 7-day retreat in Springwater. Since we will be reading from copyrighted materials, the tape that is being made can be listened to here but is not for sale. The two authors we're going to read are Huang, who was a Chinese Zen teacher of the 9th and 10th century AD, and Krishnamurti, who was a contemporary teacher who died in 1986. We're not bringing these books and readings in here to present ultimate expert authority, but to read and listen to words deeply, openly. It may clarify. The book by Huang is called Zen Teaching of Huang, translated by John Blofeld. The talks and dialogues were recorded by Huang Po's disciple, Pesu, who was a Buddhist scholar and also the governor of the province where Huang Po was teaching. Some of the words, Sanskrit words used in Buddhism, have been translated into English. The word Buddha does not only refer to the historical personage of Gautama Buddha, who lived about 500 years before Christ, but that word also refers to the awakened mind or truth, absolute truth. The word Dharma refers to the teaching, sacred teaching, teaching of the truth and also truth. I'll try to use English words wherever possible. Also, this reading is not in order to present Huang Po as accurately as possible. I have eliminated words, sentences, or paragraphs, because here we're listening for the sake of clarity, not to study a particular Zen teacher. Mind, here spelled with a capital M whenever it's used. Mind is like the void in which there is no confusion or evil, as when the sun wheels through it, shining upon the four corners of the world. For when the sun rises and illuminates the whole earth, the void gains not in brilliance, and when the sun sets, the void does not darken. The phenomena of light and dark alternate with each other, but the nature of the void remains unchanged. So it is with the mind of the Buddha and of sentient beings. If you look upon the Buddha as presenting a pure, bright, or enlightened appearance, or upon sentient beings as presenting a foul, dark, or mortal-seeming appearance, these conceptions resulting from attachment to form will keep you from supreme knowledge. Here, knowledge is not used as book knowledge, but insight, understanding, the directness of it. These conceptions about an enlightened Buddha or a foul, dark human being will resulting from attachment to form will keep you from supreme insight or understanding, even after the passing of as many eons as there are sands in the Ganges. There is only the one mind, and not a particle of anything else on which to lay hold. If you students of the way do not awake to this mind substance, you will overlay mind with conceptual thought. You will seek the Buddha outside yourselves, or you will seek for truth outside of yourselves, and you will remain attached to forms, pious practices, and so on, all of which are harmful and not at all the way to supreme understanding. Our original nature is in highest truth devoid of any atom of objectivity. It is void, omnipresent, silent, pure. It is glorious and mysterious, peaceful joy. And that is all. Enter deeply into it by awakening to it yourself. That which is before you is it, in all its fullness, utterly complete. There is naught beside. Even if you go through all the stages of progress one by one, when at last in a single flash you attain full realization, you will only be realizing that which has been before you all the time. And by all the foregoing stages, you will have added to it nothing at all. You will come to look upon those eons of work and achievement as no better than the unreal actions performed in a dream. That's why the Buddha said, I truly attained nothing. I truly attained nothing from complete, unexcelled enlightenment. And here the disciple is in dialogue with the teacher, asking, what is the way and how must it be followed? This dialogue took place. It's neat to bring this to mind over 1,000 years ago. What is the way and how must it be followed? Huang says, what sort of thing do you suppose the way to be that you should wish to follow it? Questioner, what instructions have the masters everywhere given for meditation practice and the study of the truth? Huang, words used to attract the dull of wit are not to be relied on. Questioner, if those teachings were meant for the dull-witted, I have yet to hear what truth has been taught to those of really high capacity. Huang, if there are really people of high capacity, where could they find people to follow? If they seek from within themselves, they will find nothing tangible. How much less can they find a teaching worthy of their attention elsewhere? Do not look to what is called the Dharma or the true teaching by preachers, for what sort of true teaching could that be? Questioner, if that is so, should we not seek for anything at all? Huang, by conceding this, you would save yourself a lot of mental effort. Questioner, but in this way, everything would be eliminated. There cannot just be nothing. Huang, who called it nothing? Who was this fellow? But you wanted to seek for something. Questioner, since there is no need to seek, why do you also say that not everything is eliminated? Huang, not to seek is to rest tranquil. Who told you to eliminate anything? Look at the void in front of your eyes. How can you produce it or eliminate it? And here, just to avoid misunderstanding about the void, it's not a vacuum sucked free of everything. It is, as he says, see, that's what you see before you. Without being a thing, not made into something to react to want to have or to want to eliminate. It is that quality of seeing that is without the divisive self-center. Seeing things as they are without projections onto them, or desires projected, or fears to run away from it, or denial. The questioner says later, do you mean that we should not form concepts as human beings normally do? And Huang replies, I have not prevented you, but concepts are related to the senses, and when feeling takes place and concepts are formed, wisdom is shut out. Not when feelings arise, but when they're attached to, made into something, woven in with the story of myself. To feel a feeling does not shut out wisdom. Or seeing. Seeing and feeling are one, provided it is not interpreted and analyzed and clung to, made into something important or denied as something unimportant. Questioner says, then should we avoid any feeling in relation to the truth or the true teaching? Do you see how, like we do, jumping to the opposite? Huang says something about feeling that sounds critical to the questioner, so the mind jumps to the opposite. So shouldn't we feel anything at all? Rather than looking what goes on in himself. Theoretical. Huang where no feeling arises, who can say that you're right? Questioner, why do you speak as though I was mistaken in all the questions I've asked your reverence? And Huang says, you are a man who doesn't understand what is said to him, or one could also say, who is not listening openly. What is all this about being mistaken? Just to look and to see what's there, not I'm right or wrong. Questioner, up to now you have refuted everything which has been said. You have done nothing to point out the truth to us. Huang in truth there is no confusion, but you produce confusion by your questions. What sort of truth can you go seek, true teaching can you go seeking for? Questioner, since the confusion arises from my questions, what will your reverence's answer be? Huang observe things as they are and don't pay attention to other people. Probably referring here to those who say, well, I have a teaching for you. Because obviously if there's openness, we also pay attention to other people. But not be influenced by them. This is what he's talking about. Seeking out somebody to follow. He says, observe things as they are and don't pay attention to other people. There are some people just like mad dogs barking at everything that moves, even barking when the wind stirs among the grass and leaves. Later on he says, it has never been taught that men should seek for learning or form concepts. Studying the way is just a figure of speech. It is a method of arousing people's interests. In fact, the way is not something which can be studied. Study leads to the retention of concepts, and so the way is entirely misunderstood. Moreover, the way is not something especially existing. Truly, it's not located anywhere. The first step is to refrain from knowledge-based concepts, all the ideas we have about enlightenment, or truth, or what's right, what's wrong. This implies that if you were to follow a method to the utmost limit, on reaching that limit you would still be unable to locate mind with a capital M. The way is spiritual truth and was originally without a name or title. It was only because people ignorantly sought for it that Buddhas or wise people appeared and taught them to eradicate this method of approach. Fearing that no one would understand, they selected the name Way. You must not allow this name to lead you into forming a mental concept of a road implying from here to there, taking time. Later on he says, when we talk of the knowledge I, in quotation marks, may gain, the knowledge I may gain, the learning I may achieve, my intuitive understanding, my deliverance from rebirth, and my moral way of living, our successes make these concepts seem pleasant to us, but our failures make them appear deplorable. What is the use of all that? I advise you to remain uniformly quiescent and above all activity. Do not deceive yourselves with conceptual thinking and do not look anywhere for the truth, for all that is needed to refrain from allowing concepts to arise. It is obvious that mental concepts are misleading and that the way of the Buddhas is as dangerous to you as the way of the demons. Though others may talk of the way of the Buddhas as something to be reached by various pious practices, and if one belongs to a different tradition, let's just substitute the way of Christ or the way of Allah, whatever may be one's religious upbringing or attachment. Though others may talk of the way of the Buddhas as something to be reached by various pious practices and by scripture study, you must have nothing to do with such ideas. A perception sudden as blinking, that subject and object are one, or we can say, no division, no feeling of separation, will lead to a deeply mysterious, wordless understanding, and by this understanding you awake to the truth. When you happen upon someone who has no understanding, you must claim to know nothing. He may be delighted by his discovery of some way to enlightenment, yet if you allow yourselves to be persuaded by him or her, you will experience no delight at all, but suffer both sorrow and disappointment. Even if you do obtain some trifling method, it will only be a thought-constructed thing having nothing to do with truth. Truth is something never lost even in moments of delusion, nor is it gained at the moment of enlightenment. It depends on nothing and is attached to nothing. It is all-pervading, spotless beauty. It is the self-existent, uncreated absolute. Absolute meaning not attached to anything. It is a jewel beyond all price. When a sudden flash of thought occurs in the mind, and you see it for a dream or an illusion, then you can enter into the state reached by the Buddhas of the past. Not that the Buddhas of the past really exist, or that the Buddhas or wise ones of the future have not yet come into existence. Above all, have no longing to become a future wise man or woman. Your sole concern should be, as thought succeeds thought, to avoid clinging to any of them. Nor may you entertain the least ambition to be a Buddha or an enlightened one here and now. Even if an enlightened one arises, do not think of him as enlightened or deluded, evil or good. Hasten to rid yourself of any desire to cling to him. Cut him off in the twinkling of an eye. On no account seek to hold him fast, for 1,000 locks could not stay him, nor 100,000 feet of rope bind him. This being so valiantly strive to banish and annihilate him. Why all this battle? Just see that it's an idea, an image. Or if you see the real person, then why battle? I will now make luminously clear how to set about being rid of that Buddha. Consider the sunlight. You may say it is near, yet if you follow it from world to world, you will never catch it in your hands. Then you may describe it as far away, and lo, you will see it just before your eyes. Follow it, and behold, it escapes you. Run from it, and it follows you close. You can neither possess it, nor have done with it. From this example you can understand how it is with the true nature of all things. And henceforth there will be no need to grieve or to worry about such things. But how can we prevent ourselves from falling into the error of making distinctions between this and that? Meaning reactions, really, because one distinguishes a tree from a flower, a bird call from a dog bark. The brain has that discerning capacity. But it is the wanting and not wanting, reacting, remembering what this means, and that brings sorrow, problems. Not when it's seen to happen, then it doesn't bring sorrow or problems. Because seeing just shows what is, including the reaction. Huang says, by realizing that though you eat the whole day through, no single grain has passed your lips. One could also say, read the whole day through, watch television the whole day through, listen to talks the whole day through. Tapes. No single grain has passed your lips. And that a day's journey has not taken you a single step forward. Because you're here. You don't have to go anyplace. Also by uniformly abstaining from such notions as self and other. Do not permit the events of your daily lives to bind you, but do not withdraw yourselves from them. Which does not mean I have to stick with something noxious that I see to be poisonous or false. Because Huang says, don't separate yourself. Not to go by what Huang says, but does one see or does one live on ideas? And sometimes it's very hard to discern. Avoid the error of thinking in terms of past, present, and future. The past has gone, the present is a fleeting moment, and the future has not yet come. In sitting, sit in the proper position. It was brought up yesterday. What is the proper position? Find out. One person said at times, this problem is so severe I need to lie down flat on my back. Well, then do that. The person actually asked, is it all right to do that in the sitting room? Maybe we have to call it a sitting lying room. May upset some people to see someone lying, but we did have a person once who was quadriplegic, and at times he needed to lie down, flat. One can find out how prejudiced one is, what the thoughts say, or what's the matter with him. Is he dozing? Well, the person said, actually, when I lie flat, I easily do doze. So to find what is the right position, not for all times, but for this moment, and it may change in a half an hour. Not to be rigidly attached to any prescriptions for proper posture. Traditions which are into posture brainwash one about posture. That taking the proper posture is halfway into samadhi, I heard someone say. Can be not just halfway, but completely into a self-image of oneself as a wonderful sitter, better than all the others. So he says, sit in the proper position. Who knows what he said in Chinese too? There's a translator in here too. But maybe the Chinese were into one position only. I don't know. Sometimes on these old drawings you see two old men sitting under rocks, on trees, on rocks. Not all sitting in the full lotus position. Stay perfectly tranquil, he says. I wonder how you do that. I wonder how Huang did that. Staying perfectly tranquil. I would leave that word perfect out for sake of tranquility. Do not permit the least movement of your minds to disturb you. That's another catchy thing. It's nice to hear it, but what if the movement of the mind does disturb? Then am I out? I've lost it? Or can disturbance be looked into, listened to, very broadly, very gently, with no principles attached? This alone, he says, is what is called liberation. Next is a booklet which is called Questions and Answers by Krishnamurti, brought out by the Krishnamurti Foundation, India. And this is chapter 28 on inattention. The questioner says, one realizes deeply the importance of awareness of one's inner and outer actions. Yet one slips into inattention so easily. Must there be a Krishnamurti, the books, the cassettes to keep one alert? Why? Why this gap between understanding and immediate action? Okay. Why is inattention so easy, so common? It is taking place all the time. To be aware of what is happening inside the skin and what is happening outside the skin, must there be somebody to remind you of it? Clothes do not make a man. By putting on robes, a monk does not become a saint. Either the clothes remind you that one must be constantly aware, then you depend on the clothes. Or without these outward garments, can you be aware and not slip into inattention? Is awareness, whatever it is, to be cultivated, developed through practice, through saying, I must be aware, and meditating on that awareness, or having some kind of thing to remind one of it constantly, whether a picture or a hair shirt, which is so uncomfortable that one is constantly reminded to be aware. Let us find out what it means to be aware. One cannot know everything that is happening in the world, what the politicians are doing, what the Secret Service is doing, what the army or the scientists are doing. One does not know what one's neighbor is doing, nor what one's wife or husband are doing inwardly. One cannot know everything. But one can know or become aware of one's own life inwardly. Now, is that inner movement different from the outer movement? Is that which is outside, the pollution, the corruption, the chicanery, the deception, the hypocrisy, the violence, is that very different from oneself inwardly? Or is it a constant movement like a tide going in and out? Can one be aware of this movement, see it and observe it? Can one, in the process of observing this flow, make any choice? In this movement, is awareness based on choice? Can one observe this movement, which is oneself and the world, for the world is oneself, without any choice? Can one observe it without any choice? That observation is awareness, which one does not have to cultivate, about which one does not have to have somebody remind one, neither books nor tapes. Once one sees for oneself the truth that this movement out there and the movement in here are essentially similar, one does not need any reminders. It is the same movement that has created the world, the society, the army, the navy, the scientist, the politician. And that movement is oneself. Can one seriously, not deceiving oneself, go very, very deeply into this awareness without choice, observing it without any direction? One has to be extremely watchful. Naturally, this awareness cannot be constant, but to be aware that it is not constant is to be aware of inattention. To be aware of inattention is attention. One cannot reasonably, sanely say, I am going to be alert from the moment I wake up until the moment I go to sleep. One cannot, unless one is neurotic and practices saying, I'm going to be aware, I'm going to be aware. Then it becomes words and it has no meaning. But if one sees that attention, awareness, cannot be maintained all the time, which is a fact, then inattention, not being attentive, has its value, has its meaning. Because in inattention, you discover that you're not attentive. I wonder whether you discover that in inattention. In inattention, you don't discover. But when you're attentive, you discover that you were inattentive. And that there is such a thing. And it's not to be condemned. It puts one in with everyone else. Coming down the ladder if one was on top of a ladder. The questioner asks, why is there a gap between understanding and immediate action? What does one mean by understanding? Somebody explains the nature and the structure of the atom. One listens carefully and says, yes, I understand what you're saying. Or one listens to a philosopher and says, yes, I understand the basis of your theories. All that is intellectual discernment, understanding. That is the function of the intellect, to discern, to evaluate, to analyze. And at that level one says, I understand. The questioner asks, why is there a gap between understanding of that kind and immediate action. One has deeply to understand that the word never is the thing. The explanation is never the actuality. Now, understanding takes place when the mind is quiet, not merely at the intellectual level. You're telling me something serious, philosophic. If my mind is chattering, wandering away, I cannot fully comprehend what you're saying. So I must listen to you, not translate what you're saying, or interpret what you're saying, or listen partially because I'm frightened of what you might say. For then the mind is disturbed, moving, changing, volatile. Whereas, if I really want to listen to what you're saying, the mind must be quiet. Or one can say the mind quiets down in wanting to understand. If it's just again an idea, I must be quiet, that's not quiet. Then there is a depth of understanding which is not merely intellectual or verbal. When there is profound perception of what is being said, false or true, and one can discover the truth in the false, then in that state of silent understanding, action is naturally immediate. There is no gap between the two. When one is standing on the edge of a precipice, one does not argue. The intellect does not say, let us discuss, think about it. One jumps away from the danger. There's immediate action of self-protection which is healthy, natural, normal. It means when one suddenly comes upon a precipice walking, because when one stands at the Grand Canyon, some people can't get close enough and often fall into it. Well, I was once told there was a meeting with a ranger, and a very concerned father of 2 little children was asking if children ever have fallen into the Grand Canyon. And the ranger said, you will be interested to hear that no child has ever fallen into the Grand Canyon. Adults have, and particularly men. And particularly photographers. Maybe children still have this immediate action of self-protection, which is healthy, natural, normal. One does not stand in front of a bus which is running one down, or stand looking at a dangerous snake or animal. It is a natural, instinctive response to save oneself. If perception is complete, meaning whole, which can only take place when the mind is quietly listening, not accepting, not denying, but listening, then that perception and action are the same. These 2 selections are from Krishnamurti's notebook, a journal written for 3/4 of a year in different countries. These selections are taken from India, from entries in India. In the opening of masses of leaves was a pink flower of 3 petals. It was embedded in green, and it too must have been surprised by its own beauty. It grew on a tall bush, struggling to survive among all that greenery. There was a huge tree towering over it, and there were several other bushes all fighting for life. There were many other flowers on this bush, but this one among the leaves had no companion. It was all by itself, and so more startling. There was a slight breeze among the leaves, but it never got to this flower. It was motionless and alone, and because it was alone, it had a strange beauty, like a single star when the sky is bare. And beyond the green leaves was a black trunk of the palm. It wasn't really black, but it looked like the trunk of an elephant. And as you watched it, the black turned to a flowering pink. The evening sun was upon it, and all the treetops were afire, motionless. The breeze had died down, and patches of the setting sun were upon the leaves. A small bird was sitting on a branch, preening itself. It stopped to look around and presently flew off into the sun. We were sitting facing the musicians who were facing the setting sun. There were very few of us, and the little drum was being played with remarkable skill and pleasure. It was really quite extraordinary what those fingers did. The player never looked at his hands. They seemed to have a life of their own, moving with great rapidity and firmness, striking the taut string with precision. There was never hesitation. What the right hand did, the left hand never knew, for it was beating out a different rhythm, but always in harmony. The player was quite young, grave with sparkling eyes. He had talent and was delighted to be playing to that small, appreciative audience. Then a stringed instrument joined in, and the small drum followed. It was no longer alone. The sun had set, and the few wandering clouds were turning pale rose. At this latitude there is no twilight, and the moon nearly full was clear in a cloudless sky. Walking on that road with the moonlight on the water and the croaking of many frogs became a blessing. It is strange how far away the world is and into what great depth one has traveled. The telegraph poles, the buses, the bullock carts, and the worn-out villagers were beside you, but you were far away, so deep that no thought could follow. Every feeling stayed far away. You were walking, aware of everything that was happening around you, the darkening of the moon by masses of clouds, the warning of the cycle bell, but you were far away, not you, but great vast depth. This depth went on more profoundly within itself, past time and the limits of space. Memory couldn't follow it. Memory is tethered, but this wasn't. It was total, complete freedom, without route and direction. And deep, far from thought, there was bursting energy which was ecstasy, a word that has pleasurable, gratifying significance to thought, but thought could never capture it or travel the spaceless distance to pursue it. Thought is a barren thing and could never follow or communicate with that which is timeless. The thundering bus with its blinding lights nearly pushed one off the road into the dancing waters. The essence of control is suppression. The essence of control is suppression. The pure seeing puts an end to every form of suppression. Seeing is infinitely more subtle than mere control. Control is comparatively easy. It doesn't need much understanding. Conformity to a pattern, obedience to an established authority, fear of not doing the right thing of tradition, the drive for success, these are the very things that bring about suppression of what is, or the sublimation of what is. The pure act of seeing the fact, whatever the fact be, brings its own understanding, and from this mutation takes place. The skies are clear. The small wood across the way is full of light and shadows. Early in the morning, before the sun showed over the hill, when dawn was still on the land and there were no cars going up the hill, meditation was inexhaustible. Thought is always limited. It cannot go very far, for it is rooted in memory, and when it does go far, it becomes merely speculative, imaginative, without validity. Thought cannot find what is and what is not beyond its own borders of time. Thought is time-binding. Thought unraveling itself, untangling itself from the net of its own making, is not the total movement of meditation. Thought in conflict with itself is not meditation. The ending of thought and the beginning of the new is meditation. The sun was making patterns on the wall, cars were coming up the hill, and presently the workmen were whistling and singing on the new building across the way. This entrance is in Italy. The brain is restless, an astonishingly sensitive instrument. It is always receiving impressions, interpreting them, storing them away. It is never still, waking or sleeping. Its concern is survival and security, the inherited animal responses. On the basis of these, its cunning devices are built within and without. Its gods, its virtues, its moralities are its defenses. Its ambitions, desires, compulsions, and conformities are the urges of survival and security. Being highly sensitive, the brain with its machinery of thought begins the cultivation of time, the yesterdays, the today, and the many tomorrows. This gives it an opportunity of postponement and fulfillment. The postponement, the ideal, and the fulfillment are the continuity of itself. But in this there is always sorrow. From this there is flight into belief, dogma, action, and into multiple forms of entertainment, including the religious rituals. But there's always death and its fear. Thought then seeks comfort and escape in rational and irrational beliefs, hopes, and conclusions. Words and theories become amazingly important, living on these and building its whole structure of existence on these feelings which words and conclusions arouse. The brain and its thought function at a very superficial level. However deeply thought may have hoped it has journeyed. For thought, however experienced, however clever and erudite, is superficial. The brain and its activities are a fragment of the whole totality of life. The fragment has become completely important to itself and its relationship to other fragments. This fragmentation and the contradiction it breeds is its very existence. It cannot understand the whole, and when it attempts to formulate the totality of life, it can only think in terms of opposites and reactions, which only breed conflict, confusion, and misery. Thought can never understand or formulate the whole of life. Only when the brain and its thought are still, not asleep or drugged by discipline, compulsion or hypnosis, then only is there the awareness of the whole, when the brain is quiet, still. The brain, which is so astonishingly sensitive, can be still in its sensitivity, widely and deeply attentive, but quiet. When time and its measure cease, then only is there the whole, the unknowable. We will end here for today.